Good morning, everyone. It is October 25th, 2022. We'll call the Wright County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, welcome to everyone here. The first order of business are the minutes from 10:18. Are there any corrections or changes?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Ketchmark?
thank you. Page 3 of 5, first paragraph at the top. Second line, it talks about, I was asking Kelly if he'd heard back from Marco regarding. After regarding, it should say, the Wright County owned printer in the old government building that we are paying a $1,400 a year for maintenance contract on. And my question to Administrator Kelly was if he had any updates from Marco on refunding that money. And as a follow-up, at that time, Administrator Kelly didn't have one, but he sent me one. I don't know if you sent the rest of the board that update, but did you want to share anything with the board on that?
Certainly can. I apologize, I don't have the exact number here, but in following up to that, we did speak to Mr. Best at Marco, as indicated in the minutes. They have agreed to refund us the period of time of which that was sitting at the old government center, which is approximately 7 months. It came to over $800 that they will be refunding to us.
Thank you for that follow-up, and that's what I had to, with that correction, I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
All right, motion made by Commissioner Ketchmark, seconded by Commissioner Delyden. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. And review and approval of agenda. Does anything needed to be added or removed?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve today's agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Vesh, seconded by Commissioner Wetter. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, the agenda is approved. Consent agenda. Is there anything anyone needs to remove for further discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, motion made by Commissioner Delyden. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Wetter. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, consent agenda is approved. Moving right along, at 9:03, we have Mr. Chad Hausman here.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
I have two brief items for you. Hopefully, the first item is the final payment for the 2021 pavement preservation contracts on highways 13, 14, 17, 19, 35, 37, and then a couple more. It was a busy summer that year, so we were waiting for a couple of corrective actions to be completed. That's why it's almost the end of 22 before the final payment, but they were done, so that's what this one is.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve a resolution of final acceptance for contract number 2101 for final payment. Or did I?
Sorry, that's a resolution.
Oh,
Sorry.
right, yeah,
said-
resolution. Yep.
I'll
You said
second it.
resolution, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I did.
I thought you did.
Replaying it in my head there going.
Yeah.
All right, motion made by Commissioner Vesh, seconded by Commissioner Delyden. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. I'll start with Commissioner Wetter.
Aye.
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 All right, resolution passes 5-0.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the second one is just a recognition of our staff and contractors based on one of those projects, Highway 14, from 55 to 12. What received a merit award for outstanding performance, recognizing that segment of road for its category, which was rural resurfacing category. So basically based on how well it rides and the density and lack of issues during the construction, you could submit it for an award, and statewide, we were selected for that segment of 14. So basically just wanted to recognize our staff and Knife River Corporation for their good work. They basically do all our overlays pretty much every year. At least in the 10 years I've been here, they've done 9 out of the 10 years they've gotten the contract, and they do good work. So basically this is just one of the merit awards that the staff has already received, and the contractor received it at the Minnesota Asphalt Paving Association banquet a couple months ago. So
Yeah.
just wanted to recognize our staff for their good work and the contractor. So,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that forward.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations to all of
and
you.
normally some staff show up and the contractor, but it's everybody's still too busy, so everybody's out and about. So normally we just do a little recognize them, but like I said, everybody's busy and still working. So
Maybe get everyone together for a photo somewhere.
exactly, yep. So
Ma-
all right,
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
before he runs away,
yes, sir.
just out of curiosity, how the 2 pain points over in the St. Michael Albertville area are going.
Well, the water main opened yesterday, their project. So that segment is open, so there's no detour for the city's water main project on 19. And then ours is going well. We wrapped up storm sewer on Saturday, and hopefully they're grading and concrete work today, and hopefully by November 1st, we'll have that all done on 19 through the one-way pairs.
Yeah, I noticed they were
Wonderful.
doing grading this morning
Yes.
when I drove by there.
Yep, it's a tight area, so it's slow going.
Yeah, on 18 and 37.
I get a lot of questions.
I was really surprised that they didn't work Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, as far behind as I think
Yep.
they are.
Yep, I know. A lot of times it's if they're waiting for curb and gutter, and the curb and gutter people are down in Morris or something, and then, okay, we'll be there Monday.
Well, their equipment was all there.
Yeah,
sitting
I
there.
agree. Yep,
So I'm not sure what the deal
What's
was.
the ETA on that?
Um,
They're running out of time with the weather.
oh yeah, for sure. They're looking at about the same time frame.
Okay.
So
Because you guys are getting close to be, you
Yes.
be ready to go on signs right away when that gets to that point?
yep. Well, everything from the roundabout to the east is striped already, so that's all ready to go. So the public is using that. Everybody heading to the east on that road. Talked to Knife River today, this morning, and the plant that is paving that roundabout is expected to close up by the end of this week. So hopefully they'll pave it this week, and then we can get it striped and signs and seeded, and so. Hopefully by deer, everybody wants to go deer hunting, so that's usually a good deadline. Nobody wants to be working deer hunting, so,
November 5th is the
yeah.
Day,
It's usually the deadline, the guys want to get done, so.
yeah.
And those are the only 2 projects that are left to get done yet, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a project in South Haven, but that's a city project that has state funding, so we're administering it. So there's a couple of small ones like that, but otherwise our program will be wrapped up, so, yeah.
Well, good. Thanks for the update.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Jeff.
you.
Yeah, keep up the good work. All right, Mr. Matt Detchen, Parks and Recreation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I got a couple items. First one here is the assessments to be levied across some of our ditch systems for the 2022 year. There are a couple that I would like to discuss. The first one being County Ditch number 10. You can see that the current balance that's in there is $495,089. We just assessed that ditch last year, and the cutoff date for assessments under drainage law is September, and we're still finishing up repairs. We have a Keats Avenue culvert and some punch list items. So instead of having essentially 3 assessments 3 years in a row, I'd recommend for that one, I know it is a large amount, but holding that one off until next year, until the whole project is completing, and then sending out the assessments to landowners. The other one is County Ditch number 13. That one, we are having the public hearing on the redetermination of benefits this afternoon, where we would finalize that, and that would be the new list that we're assessing to that ditch. So it is a decent amount of money, but I would recommend holding that one off as well until next year, until we're able to do some repairs. Other than that, there's County Ditch 4, County Ditch 24, County Ditch 30, and County Ditch 39.
Matt, just a clarification, isn't the public hearing at 11 this morning?
11,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, sorry, maybe I misspoke. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
That's what I had to, yeah.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Ketchmark?
Thank you. Thanks for coming in, Matt. Reference at Keats Avenue pending work. Can you give an update on that last culvert?
Yeah, culverts sections are in and just doing the final, backfilling and compacting and stuff like that. The crane was there, and I wasn't able to get out there last Friday. We talked, we were trying to do some seeding on some of our projects where we're restricted on time. We had to get them seeded within 7 days. So I haven't actually been out to Keats today or yesterday. So, but yeah, good progress. I kept in touch with ISG, and that project is moving along. Should be ready to go, open up the road here. So.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing with ditch 10, with holding off on the assessment, are we holding the contractors with work left to do to prices that we were already agreed to, or is there some of these that are subject to change next year before the final bill?
Yep, yeah, I know the Keats culvert is the last item. They finished up kind of their punch list item. So we'd release that payment amount for the punch list is kind of irrelevant because they have to fix those up anyway. We don't pay them extra for that. But the Keats Avenue culvert, we were withholding around $21,000 for that. And then plus our 10% for contingencies to make sure that they would finish the project. So they would, essentially our last pay app would be coming here probably in the next few weeks after they finish up Keats. So that answers your question.
Then on the bottom, you've got the current tiers set.
Yep.
For the payment. Are we going over that now?
Yeah, I actually have to do that as a separate item. So you have to
okay.
approve first which ones we're going to be assessing this year, and then we have to set the payment tiers. We have to do that every year, actually, and the interest rate.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Lyden?
No.
I have just a question, but if you.
Oh, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So you're proposing to hold off the $495,000 a year for assessing for ditch 10 to the following year, correct?
I would. Yep.
And then this might be a question for finance. Of the $740,000 that was assessed last year on ditch 10, I'm guessing greater than 70% of it is being amateurized over time, I'm assuming. Just question from this standpoint, withholding that off from a cash flow perspective, I'm assuming we're probably still pretty good on it, but is it making us change our methodology from the amount of money that we're investing in longer term versus needing to use for cash flow to pay these vendors? Mostly just because it's going to play into what we'd set our interest rate at. That's the reason I asked the question.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Commissioner Vetch, we are investing it. It's one of the funds that is being monitored for balances, and we're separately allocating interest there.
Okay. Just because these are pretty big dollar amounts, and from that perspective, if now holding off a year that we're not going to get any payments on it, that may play into the factor of what we need to set our interest rates at, just because we're losing out on a substantial amount of funds that we could invest.
Correct.
And kind of to add to that, I mean, we have a lot of them that are in process of redetermination of benefits, and I mean, quite a lengthy list of things, lots going on. So those payments are also being held
Yep.
this year.
Yep.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the assessments for County Ditch 4, County Ditch 24, County Ditch 30, and County Ditch 39.
All right. Motion made by Commissioner Glyden to approve those expenses for those ditches.
I'll second that.
All right. And seconded by Commissioner Vetch. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? All right. Very good, thank you. All right. So we have the next item, the assessment and tier rates.
Yep. So yeah, the assessment tiers, are something that, it's not standard in drainage law. We pulled a bunch of different counties last time we set them to kind of get a feel for how they separate those, especially for the larger assessments. I would recommend maybe tweaking our current assessment tiers a little bit. As you can see, we have anywhere from 1 year to pay it off, which is $500 or less, to 20 years, which is anything over $50,000 in assessment. And that assessment isn't to a specific parcel. it'd be to landowners, because we have lots of landowners that own multiple parcels, and if you spread that out by just the parcel, then they would have a lot of pretty large assessments, but on different parcels, so they won't have that opportunity to elect into a larger tier. But I think there's just some, maybe confusion with those mid tiers, the 5 to 10 year, because it jumps pretty drastically. 5 years, 1,000 to 10,000, and then they have 10 years for anything from 10,000 to 50,000. So and just from what we hear from people too, and wanting to give them the opportunity to pay that off at a rate that makes sense for them, kind of recommend removing some of those tiers and just going from the 1 year, $500,000 or less, 3 years, 500 to 10,000, and then anything over 10,000, we would just give them longer. And again, these are just general. Jan and I sat down and tried to figure out assessment tier structure that works. You can essentially do anything you want.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Vetch?
the one thing I would probably modify was I'd probably go 1, 5, and 20.
Do 5, yeah.
Yep.
That 10,000 is quite a bit.
Quite a bit. If you get
For
to that
3
net
years, yeah.
for 3 years, you
I think that was a typo on my end, yeah, because in the current tier we have, 5 years was 1,000 to 10,000, and I must have just put 3 instead of 5
Okay,
years.
yeah, I was thinking
My
that.
bad. Yeah.
And then the other question would be when setting rates for it, I'm kind of inclined to do a rate. Can we do a tiered rate where if you're doing the, 5 year or less, having a lower interest rate versus if you're doing it the 20 year, just because our investments here, the longer we put them out, the further we'll yield on it. So therefore, I feel like giving them the kind of the same tier that we get for our investment side of it. So if you're doing that 5 years for that dollar amount, maybe we'll get some people that have 15,000 that'll just amortize it over a 5 year versus a 20.
And, yes, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like when we were having the discussions a couple years ago, that we were doing kind of tiered interest rates too. So were you part of that discussion, or was that before you started?
Yeah, no, it would be, that from my understanding of it, the 2.5% per year interest rate. So that would be an interesting one to figure. It's not, as you build that up, obviously that gets worse and worse. And that would really be a good question for finance
Yeah.
too.
When
just
this
to
was
make
a
sure.
question, because I know like for road assessments you have with like a city. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Once you go into that amortization, you can't pay early. It is what it is. And is this how we're setting this up so that you can't decide that all of a sudden you had a windfall at year 7, you can just pay it all off and avoid the interest? Are we doing it like it's amortized out and it is what it is, or are we whether you pay early or not, you're paying the interest and all, or are we setting it up in a structure where
Payment without penalty?
payment without penalty?
It is payment without penalty. Obviously, we have a little bit different than if we bonded it and did that, where if everyone paid off, then we still have to pay that. But we would just, since we're acting as the bank, so to say, and funding that up front, that if someone elected into a 20-year and then all of a sudden they got an inheritance, and they could pay it off early without a penalty.
And that's where the trouble would goes with having tiered interest rates. If you don't have it set on when city bonded projects, it's amortized out. You pay, but you pay. I guess from that structure, having one interest rate is probably going to be the easiest from
Probably.
a calculation standpoint.
And I just would want to point out too, when we pooled again, it was same mic as we did for when we were talking about riprap on culverts. So an email was sent out to every drainage authority. We asked them what their interest rates were. The next lowest, I think, was 4%. So we're the lowest that I'm aware of at 2.5 currently. So.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Ketchmark?
thank you. And of course, we know there's a lot of ditch projects going on in District 5. My phone isn't ringing about the payment plan being, too far off for the folks, or the interest rate. But I like the suggestions that you made here with that typo correction. And Finance said in correspondence with them that payment plan doesn't pose any problems. I assume that the interest rate was the same. We haven't heard from them that, hey, we need to bump this up to make things more flush. So I'd be in favor of leaving that the same, and, I mean, part of this is a price that the county is paying for not maintaining these ditches for a long time. And if it would have been, there would have been less of these large projects, large dollar amounts, and I think that's one of the considerations in keeping the rate lower.
Yeah, I mean, the county is a drainage authority, but we're not responsible to pay for these, but we are responsible to order the repairs and the maintenance and that kind of thing. So just to clarify that.
So, Madam Chair, I'm kind of a blend. I understand Commissioner Ketchmark's perspective on that, because a lot of these price tags did grow up exponentially high because of, I guess, undue work over a period of time. So for that fact, I think, keeping the interest rate as palatable as possible, but then having to finesse it with what the current rates are from an investment perspective. I'm kind of at the point where I'd say moving it to a 3.25 is a reasonable rate. It kind of gives them still better than any lending perspective, but it also gets us close to where we need to be from an investment point of view. So, Madam Chair, I'd make a motion to set the tiers for the 1, 5, and 20 at a 3.25 interest rate.
I'll second it.
Motion made by Commissioner Vetch, seconded by Commissioner Delyden to set the interest rate for the tiers at 3.25%. Any more discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Ketchmark?
I'm not an expert at this, but we went through the budget process, and I'd like to hear from finance with, what we went through was as it is now. So can finance add anything on if this change is really necessary for the financial status of the county? Does it present an extra hardship if we don't raise it, or where are we at? It's kind of one of those things where we've gone through the budget, but now we have this that's subject to change.
Commissioner Ketchmark, I don't know that I can speak off the cuff to that. I wouldn't say that it's causing us financial hardship, but as far as the interest rate goes, as you look at how interest rates have changed even in the last 10 months from the beginning of the year to now on long-term things, I mean, we've gained 3%. That's a huge jump. So if we're only charging 2.5%, I mean, that's a big difference from the nearly 5% we can get on investing our cash. So it really is up to the five of you as to how you want to deal with your constituents in this respect, but I would encourage us to have a higher interest rate.
Madam
as the-
Chair,
It's fair, and it's about in the center.
Can I finish as long as I got her here? So, but as the budget book sits now, but without us making any changes, is there some flag or some concern that you'd have if we don't? Because I haven't heard until now, and that's why I'm asking, instead of just, shooting from the hip here that, hey, that sounds good because the rest of society is going this way, but I'm really kind of looking county-specific to our books and budget.
My comment to that is that this is the ditch fund. It is segregated from the remainder of county operating funds. So any earnings on the cash set aside for ditches stays there. We can't use it to supplement our budget in any manner. It is segregated as required.
Madam Chair, but to that point, the money that's being loaned to cash flow this is general fund money. So that's
Correct.
lost
Yes.
revenue to the general fund from an investment perspective.
Yes, I do agree with you there.
And Madam Chair, to that point, 3/4 of a point going from 2.5 to 3.25, and we're cash flowing right now about, going into this next year will be well over $1 million. And just that 3/4 of a point in a 12-month period of time is over $10,000 to $12,000 of investment perspective just on that 3/4 of a point. So, and now that's $12,000 that's lost to the general taxpayers that we're basically giving it at a super subpar loan rate to the ditch owners. Now, a 3.25 is still lower than anybody would get from a consumer loan perspective. So we're finessing it because they would be more at around a 5% if they went to get a consumer loan for it. So we're taking that into consideration, but we're also taking into consideration that this is money that could be invested and is a loss to the general public's funds as well.
Madam Chair, thanks for both of you for that explanation. That helps, that perspective. Jan?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I just want to point out that the assessments that you have approved for this year are minimal compared to what we normally do. We're not doing the 495,000. You can address this issue again next year was in regards to the interest rate. And the assessments that are out there already are at the 2.5, and that's not going to change, is my understanding. I'm not going to go back in and change the interest rate for those. So,
The new ones.
So, Madam Chair, it's not a rolling interest rate, so where they're locked in on these, is how we have that set up?
that's the way it has always been.
Okay. I guess I would still say we'd want to adjust it to posture what the rate's going to be going forward, as well as to the fact that what I want to avoid happening here is somebody that has 200,000 that's like, well, why would I pay it off? I'll keep the 3.25 here. I'll put that 200,000, invest it in the market because the interest rates, I can make so much money in the investment here, and basically we're losing that money that everybody else is at a subpar loan, and you're giving that ditch owner ability to invest money because we're giving them such a cheap loan. That's what we want to avoid happening.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Ketchmark?
So a question about process. If somebody already agreed to a loan here with a certain length of time and a certain interest rate, sounds like there's some debate on whether we should leave them alone or if we should go back in, cross it out and say, well, we changed it today, now you're gonna be on the hook for 3.25 instead of 2.5. Is that up for debate here? Or we could also say, for any loans that start from today going forward, the new interest rate would apply. Is that the options that we have?
That's what I thought it was, but
To be honest with you, with our current tax system, which I'll still be using for these assessments, I'm not sure how I would do that.
How you do it,
Clean.
which? Go
To
back?
Go back and change the interest rate with, obviously, there's been payments on some of those.
I see a problem with going back when people have already planned for a long term, and then we're gonna say, oh, here, we changed the rules today at today's board. It seems like it'd be a better separation to start from now going forward on any new project.
Yeah, it gets complicated enough with the tiers.
Okay.
Because it's by landowner and not by parcel. So I have to calculate that separate on Excel and find out which ones. So I mean, if you start messing with the interest rates and stuff too, I mean, I could, I'm not saying I couldn't, but.
Madam Chair,
yeah, Commissioner Gladden.
we're talking $10,000 here. I think this conversation is getting a little out there for $10,000. That's all we're talking about for next year. So whether it's 2.5% or 3.25%, we're not talking about much money at all. So I don't see where the issue is.
Madam Chair, I think we're talking about any new ditch project versus any existing one in the works. And if we're gonna change people's,
Well, again, if you went to a bank, you don't get a fixed loan, you get a variable interest rate. But the problem we have here is the software we have would be difficult to do that, to go back and change it. Now, if you want to do something in the future, and like next year when you have a lot more money involved into it, maybe at that point you can look at it. But at this point, with the software we have, to make it more difficult for them to be able to go and do a variable interest rate, I think it's just a waste of time.
So, Madam Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Vetch?
and this is Mr. Bowen, I don't know if we have any kind of these loans on this, if there's any kind of documentation as to did we give them a locked rate or did we give them variables? And even right now, our system isn't set up to do so. And I'm also afraid that we postured to this as a locked rate for those at the 2.5. And if that is the case, then we are handcuffed to that. If we want to make changes going forward, that it would be variable, which we might want to consider. And if the new tax system can accomplish that, I think that is to our best interest. But in the meantime, I think we keep the 2.5 unless somebody has anything that says it would be otherwise, our ability to ebb and flow with it, because with the hyperinflation and with interest rates all over the chart, that interest rate needs to be variable at some point. But in the meantime, I do think we need to posture that the rates are going up. So that's where I still stand on the 3.25 from that perspective. And the 2.5, I guess we'll have to have a discussion on what that agreement was made with previous.
So, Madam Chair,
Commissioner Ketchmark?
for clarification then, you're proposing to move any new loans to 3.25
Which is 10,000, a little over $10,000 for this next year.
and leaving everyone on the books at 2.5 alone?
If we, because we don't know,
At this point, we don't know what we
if we
don't
can
know.
even do that, because I don't know what the agreements were out there on those, what was postured to those individuals when they went into those payment plans. If it was postured to them, I don't even know if it was done in any kind of writing.
But again, the software is not capable of doing it, so at this point, I think that point is mute until the attorney has a chance to research that, and we have software that's capable of doing it.
Because going back and it's just in my memory that we had different interest rates after so many years, but I could be wrong, and that's probably not something that we even voted on, but that was part of the discussion. For the first 5 years, it's this much, but that's, yeah. So you had made the motion, right, before? 3.25, and we did.
And I seconded
You
it.
seconded, Commissioner Lyden, I didn't write that down. All right,
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Wetter,
So to clarify it, so next year, the 495,000 and the, the 38,000 would be assessed next year at 3.25?
That would be up to the board at that point.
Okay, at that point.
yeah.
Has to be
Because
set
we have,
every year.
we have a long
Okay,
list.
so it's set at the beginning of the year for that amount. But it could, you might tell them it might be higher.
Yeah, so we would set that here and set which dishes we're assessing. Then we would send out a notice for landowners essentially to prepay that and what the interest rate was set at and what the tier was and what their special assessment would be. So.
Otherwise, the rest of these that amount to over 10,000 are still at 2.25.
No, those will be at 3 1/4.
Those will be
Those will be at 3 1/4. Okay.
We have a previous balance of
Oh,
probably
because those.
$600,000-700,000.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
At the 2.5.
Okay,
And I do agree with Commissioner Ketchmark about having to help out these homeowners or these landowners because we haven't done anything over the years. So I think we do need to keep their interest rates below market to make it easier for them. And in all honesty, I would like to look at the future to have a variable interest rate, because if we end up having it at a higher rate and for some reason they can go out and borrow it cheaper, but maybe that's to our advantage too, I don't know. But anyway, something for future discussion.
All right,
so how would the variable work?
Again, that would be variable just like at a regular bank, so that would be
Okay,
something
so
for
that
further
might-
discussion.
Okay,
Variable would be based on what we set it at annually here. So basically, it would be 2.5 for this for 2022. Next year is 3.25, and whatever year we set it at. So it's variable based on board action.
so it could even go lower.
It could,
Okay,
all right.
based on market.
understand.
Yep.
Based on market, okay.
There's no other discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
I
All right, none opposed? All right.
just wanted to
Motion
be
passes.
clear.
Thanks, Matt. We'll see you at 11. All right, moving on to our public hearing. Mr. Barry Reinberger. Are you going to guide us through this?
I can certainly try. Do we need to do anything to open a public hearing, Mr. Bone?
I will open, yep. All right, I will open the public hearing to discuss our Adoption of ordinance number 22-2 and resolution approving summary language for publication, amending the Wright County Code of Ordinances, Chapter 156, solid waste.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This ordinance is an amendment to what we currently have on the books, which is fairly dated back into the 1970s, for the majority of that ordinance. The process started in 2020 when we adopted a solid waste management plan that called out for the licensing of solid waste haulers. Since 2020, from my understanding, I wasn't in my position now, I wasn't even aware of it. It hadn't been done yet. And so when I came on board in December, that's one of the first things Attorney Kreiser put on my desk was to get a solid waste ordinance adopted. And so what we did is we took Sherburne County's ordinance, which is fairly in-depth. They have their own solid waste department with a number of staff, and they have activities far beyond what we're looking at doing. So we pared down their ordinance. Most of the language we thought was really good as far as applying it to what we do and what we're looking at. So we pared it down to remove language that was beyond the scope of what we were looking at doing, and inspecting landfills and transfer stations and those types of things. We removed a lot of that language, pared it down. I think it went from 117 pages to now it's roughly 34, 35 pages, with a third of that being definitions. But definitions are good, because that's,
They are.
you know, anywhere, especially, you know, as a zoning person, if you can't define something, it leads to vagueness and troubles in interpreting. So I'm a fan of definitions, because it's something we can always point back to and say, okay, what is it? Well, here it is. We've defined it. We're not guessing at what it is. So, we've prepared this. We've got it ready. We have our language that we need to license solid waste haulers. We're setting up a fee structure for the licensing component, and we're looking at moving forward.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Barry? Yeah, a lot of work went into this, for sure.
I spent a lot of time reading through and striking out and reformatting, and then reading through and striking out and reformatting again. A little bit of added language, but not much. Between Attorney Kreiser and myself, we did work through a couple of additions we added in. And some things, you know, it was always, well, what do we keep in? What do we take out? Do we want to do this? You know, so reading through the language, like, no, we don't want to do this. I'm going to take it out. Primarily because, you know, we're looking, it's a countywide ordinance, but the vast majority of the enforcement and work in my office is not within city limits. So we wanted to be very careful to not step on the city's toes. And let them, you know, maybe manage facilities if they have their own facilities within their municipalities. There was, in the version you got as part of the packet, there was added language. Once we sent it out for publication we had a city that was concerned about their ability to limit the number of recyclers in their city, which they do. And so we added a little bit of language under 4.7 that basically allows a municipality to, the language reads that any solid waste hauler must also offer recycling or must do recycling. The city wants one recycler, they have a number of haulers, but they only contract with one specific recycler. And so they didn't want this ordinance change to require them to now let every hauler recycle within the city. And so we did add some language that allows them, if the municipality requires something different, they could accept themselves out of that requirement.
And I learned a new word, Putrescible, yeah.
Retrucible.
Is that how you say it? Putrescible?
Retrucible.
I didn't look it up. I already have the definition, so I didn't look up how to say it.
And the basis for this, I did forget, is coming from the MPCA. You know, it is a requirement that we license haulers by state statute and state rule. We haven't been, and so without an ordinance, we risk losing our SCORE funding. And so we've been through that once before, is my understanding, somewhere 2018. That's where the revised solid waste management plan came from. They actually pulled our funding until we got the management plan done, and then they reinstituted our funding, and so we don't want to fall into that category again.
All right.
Madam Chair, Just a couple questions, and I talked with Barry at length, and I think you kind of know what I'm gonna ask,
Yep.
because you were gonna look at a few more things. So a 35-page ordinance, as you pointed out, 9 pages of definitions. What could the citizens of Wright County and the haulers look for as an improvement that's gonna come out of the garbage collecting process with this ordinance?
You know, that's a good question. I don't have an answer to that one.
I mean, other than someone dangling $400,000 over our head and saying, if you don't do this, we potentially are gonna not give it to you.
The benefits do come down to reporting, and so it's to know how much waste is collected within the county and to get accurate reporting numbers. The state is looking at, you know, every year we have to report all of our trash numbers to the state, and they want as accurate of information as they can get, and this is the one way we can get it. Right now, for my, 1 year of having to look through what it takes to get the numbers, what our staff go through to try to find the numbers is, it's extremely difficult. We don't know what they are. Half of them are guesses. And so we're giving numbers to the state that aren't as true and accurate as they probably should be. We have goals for recycling and waste collection in our plan that this will allow us to track and see if we're meeting those goals. As far as increasing the amount of recycling that's done on a yearly basis, reducing the amount that's actually getting brought to landfills. And so it's in the end, it's to better track our solid waste and understand how much solid waste we generate in ways we can improve and reduce the amount of solid waste that's generated in the county.
So with most of the other counties you had said have been doing this for a while, now we're gonna start. Has the state said what they're gonna do with this data and how that's gonna help anything around here?
So SCORE, oh, sorry, Commissioner Ketchmark, sorry, Madam Commissioner. So SCORE wants accurate recycling and MSW numbers. They want to know the percentage that we recycle as a county and as a state. They have a goal set forth with SCORE that was, I believe they want 50% to be recycled at a average person's recycling rate. Looking at the townships right now that I've gotten with quarterly reports, where some townships aren't even doing 32%. So it's just to get better on recycling percentages.
So the 400,000 that we're gonna get is not gonna change by doing this program, right? We're not gonna get any more. I would request the staff to keep track of the time. And you had said you don't know, but you didn't think it was gonna take a lot of extra staff time. But at the end of the year, I think we should have something to show for it that's, because there's a lot of things about auditing and inspecting and all these things, but there might be a time when a phone call is made to the MPCA and say, we were getting 400,000 before we did this. Now we're having to do it and spend time and money with staff running this thing. So maybe we should be getting a little more. Otherwise, we're cutting into the SCORE money that we didn't have to use before.
The number goes up as your population increases as well.
Madam Chair, we are also charging a fee to those solid waste people. So that's designed to cover our extra time.
Yeah, and it's gonna take some time to flesh all that out to make sure that what we charge is indicative and covering the cost of what it's taking to run the program. Jacob will be tracking his time, as will any other staff that have work to do with this, and so that we have a real good indication of whether the original fee that we were looking at, which is based on looking at what other counties have done, whether that's adequate for our situation or not. It's something that we may, need to increase it, or, that's something we'll give, those numbers will, be coming to the board as part of the fee schedule discussions for 2024.
Now, what was the notification process? I know the cities and townships got notified and some gave us some feedback that we were gonna do this. But as far as the haulers, or let's say the compost facility that we're reading about, all these independent haulers of different material there, how are we gonna notify the folks that, hey, we just passed this just for info, come up and see us? Is there any plan for that?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna be sending out letters to all the haulers indicating that we've now adopted an ordinance that's going to require this, given the timeframes that we have set up in the ordinance for getting themselves licensed and providing us the application and information that they're going to be required to provide. So they will get a letter indicating that they're required to do this. For everyone, Jacobs already has a list, and we're continuing to add to it. As far as the notification on the ordinance itself, just standard ordinance notification. It gets notified in the paper. We do send all ordinance amendments to all the cities and townships for their review as well, and they have the ability to respond back.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Wetter?
Well, I've talked to some haulers already, and like they said, well, we're doing it already because of the other counties, most that I talk to go haul to Hennepin County. I guess the fees, you haven't figured that out, what the cost of the license would be yet? And would that change from year to year? I mean, would you have to get a new one each year because costs go up? Or-
Yes. Yeah, it's a yearly licensing format. So you get a license. It's, from what we've looked at, and actually it'll be on the fee schedule discussion, it'll be $250 for the company and then $25 per truck or vehicle that hauls. We have a design for a sticker. We're going to be sending out stickers for all of their trucks. That's the way we track which ones are licensed and which ones aren't.
So then they'd probably have to put it in a designated area.
Yeah, there's the ordinance actually, I believe spells it out where it all has to go.
Okay.
All right. Anything up here? Otherwise, I will open this up to any public that would like to speak to this ordinance. Is there one from the public that would like to speak to this ordinance? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this ordinance? Hearing none, I'll close the public comments and bring it back up to the board. Board, what are your wishes? Is there-
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just want to articulate one thing. And Barry, you'll probably, I know we haven't defined out, we don't exactly know what the fee collection will be, but just for the general public understanding of this, I mean, I agree that, there isn't a huge articulable benefit to citizens for this fee, but the weight of the state holding $400,000 carrot for us to do it, that's a pretty heavy loss, considering that these fees we've postured that it'll be probably less than $15,000 in fees that we would collect annually for these stickers, based on that proposed. We don't know exactly how many trucks are out there, but based on, we know that it's probably less than 500 trucks. That's where we're coming up with the number of collecting about $15,000 in fees. So from that perspective, it's not a huge amount of expense when you dilute that out across all the different trucks. But nonetheless, the state wants to know who are the producers of trash versus who are the recyclers. They want to know who are the givers of trash versus who are the takers of trash. And this is one way for them to get that data. And I guess us having to charge out that fee or lose $400,000 in state funding, it's a pretty heavy loss, so.
Yes, for sure. And I mean, we need someone to pick up our garbage. So, I mean, that's the advantage of having the haulers, they pick it up and they.
I had asked, Madam Chair, I had asked at one time, how they figure out when they do their score amounts. Businesses like mine that I do a lot of recycling of cardboard and then the grocery stores like the Cubs, where they have the balers. They guess. That's what they've done in the past. So I think this will help get a more defined information out there. And with that, I will make a motion to approve the resolution for ordinance amendment 22-2.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Delyden, seconded by Commissioner Wetter. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. I'll start with Commissioner Vetch.
Aye.
Oh, aye.
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 Aye. Resolution passes. Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on to items for consideration, administration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you recall, that we do a public hearing for our fee schedule annually. Staff have been compiling those, and you may recall some of those items were discussed already as part of our budget process. So want to make sure that we incorporate those. Additionally, we're working to get them all consolidated in one place and review. So the first item to ask today is just to set the fee schedule public hearing. Requested date and time would be the board meeting, the 29th of November at 9:30 in the morning.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve public hearing related to changes in the fees for the service schedule on November 29th at 9:30.
Motion made by Commissioner Lyden. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Ketchmark. One question, I already had public hearing at 9:30 on that date. Is that because we knew we were gonna do this?
Verify, I know we have a second one that day as well.
We have it's Crawford, Lake
Continuation
Improvement
of
Project.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Crawford.
Okay, that's what it was.
So we probably
Crawford
should move it to
Lake.
like
Yep. At 10.
9:45.
We gave the notice for Crawford Lake, even on this hearing right here?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
move this one to like 9:45.
I think that'd be an appropriate amount of time. Are
9:45?
Crawford is,
you anticipating more time?
yeah, Crawford's gonna take a while.
Okay, 10 o'clock?
Okay,
I mean, at this point, I think it will, yeah.
so 10
10
o'clock.
o'clock?
Let's schedule it for 10.
All right. Do you want to amend the motion?
I'll amend that motion
All right.
to do it at 10 o'clock as part of the board meeting.
that-
Who had the second on that?
I did.
Ketchmark?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
please
fine.
read that. All right. Discussion?
Madam Chair, just a request, could we get the current fee schedule sooner
Absolutely.
than later?
Yep.
Okay.
We should be able to get that out yet this week to you for review. If we do need some discussion, we could discuss at the workshop in November if need be.
Okay.
Madam Chair, because in the past, typically you give us the old one with the proposed changes in red in advance is typically what.
Correct, yes, it's, we've posted in the past to the public notice, the current, the change. We've also gathered all of them into one document across the county too, so you'll just have that for review as well.
All right.
Ms. Administrator Matthijs, you had something?
We can send that out to you today. We were waiting for after the public hearing on solid waste because we had to add those 2 fees to the
Okay.
schedule
Sounds
beforehand, but we do have that all done, so.
Thank you.
All right. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that is set. Committee minutes, Commissioner Ketchmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I got 5 pages of minutes here from October 17th, when we had our committee of the whole reviewing the staff report from the Election Integrity Work Group. So there was a PowerPoint that was presented or had questions and answers that were raised during that group. And then there was opportunity for the public to comment, or the representatives of the group that were on that integrity work group could speak. And in addition, Commissioner Vetch had made comments about the balanced ballot board and the drop boxes that were being utilized in Howard Lake and Otsego, not Wright County sanctioned boxes. We talked about ballot counting versus machine counting, and that there's a margin of error with both. One recurring request from the representative groups was to rerun all ballots through a digital scan, DS 450, a faster version of the DS 200 vote tabulation machines currently utilized by Wright County at the end of the election day. The argument for rerunning all ballots through the DS 450 was to ensure the accuracy of the DS 200, thereby ensuring the accuracy of the vote tabulation, and the DS 450 was able to run more ballots than the DS 200. So some representatives spoke that were on the group or were representing them. And I had noted that I was on the group and that I didn't see any evidence or probable cause or reasonable articulable suspicion that indicated that Wright County had the intent to compromise voter integrity, and that I thought this was necessary in order to spend money to address any of the direct requests. Election Manager Tyler Webster said in regard to the first question of counting absentee ballots after the close of polls on election night, that it was not feasible. The election staff typically is working an 18-hour day on election day, and to delay the count until 8 p.m. would push the election results being released back to sometime in the afternoon of the next day. So there was talk about the long shifts of the employees in that case. There was a speaker that spoke about the ballot box and what that meant as far as absentee ballots and what was defined as tabulating or counting. And the meeting adjourned at 10:49.
All right.
With that, I'll make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole minutes from October 17th.
All right, motion made by Commissioner
I'll
Ketchmark,
second it.
seconded by Commissioner Deline. And any discussion?
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner Vetch.
So, a lot of this whole discussion comes down to the whole definition of what is tabulating, what is not tabulating. Is putting ballots into the DS-200, is that tabulating or is it not? We don't have any court challenge on it to this point. A lot of it comes down to the section of 203B.121. I appreciate the back and forth and the great effort that the staff here has done to try and articulate their interpretation of it versus that of the opposition. I think both sides have, strong arguments to it. I really would love to see a court case come out and really set a definition on it, because I think it would be cleaner for everybody if that was the case. That being said, there was always the discussion of, okay, what do we do with absentee ballots in light of this situation? Is it feasible to do it at the close of Election Day? No, that is not. Kind of looking at it, just 25,000 is about a reasonable expectation of what we have for absentee ballots, right? A little bit north of that, but give or take, 25, 28,000. With that being said, if you ran them through the DS 450, you're looking at about 6 hours at 72 ballots per minute, and that's if you nonstop had no breaks in between precincts. You ran one, but that's not feasible because you're going to have, every time you do precincts, there's things that you actually have to do to put them into envelopes and make sure that they're all dotted and I's, T's are crossed, I's are dotted, etc. And there's going to be ballots that are rejected, and there's a whole process that has to be done with those rejected ballots. Okay, so figuring that it would take you 6 hours to do 27,000 ballots, you would have to give yourself about double the time because of anomalies pieces to it. So if you started the process at 8 a.m. on Election Day, you potentially could have it done by 8 p.m. that night and have all the absentee ballots ran within a 12-hour period of time. Second factor of challenge is, do we have a balanced election judges to facilitate that? You would need 4 of them, 2 from each side of the political party balances. That is what would basically be holding us up from being able to achieve the request that's out there. We have the equipment to do it. It is possible from a logistical standpoint. It's more of a staffing perspective as to whether we have the election judges to do it. Now, are we required by law to do it? No, because of legal interpretations that stand out there in the gray area. Without the Supreme Court telling us one way or the other, or somebody taking it to the Supreme Court to tell us one way or the other that putting a ballot through a DS-200 is tabulating it, well, that would change elections across the state of Minnesota dramatically, because ballots are being put in those machines days before here at the polling places. That would stop immediately. That would actually exponentially turn that number of ballots up from 28,000 to well over 30,000 ballots that we'd be counting on that day of. does that say we shouldn't at least try and look at this perspective? I mean, I think the request is reasonable, but I guess I would have to say, I would defer to staff as to whether if they put an ask out there to see if they could get party balance election judges to do so, then great. If you can't, then I guess we're still within the legal limits to do so at the current practice, and it's the practice that all our sister 86 counties across the state are doing. But I also want to understand that these individuals and this group has brought together a good case for clarity, if nothing else, into our law. When there's ambiguity in the language and what it means and the process to it, it lends yourself to controversy. So I think if nothing else, I hope that there is a case that's taken to the Supreme Court so that we can get clarity on that. But in the meantime, I would love to see the staff put out their efforts to see if there is election judge balance, that we could even facilitate this request to run them through the DS 450 on the day of. It's a great piece of equipment that we invested in here. I'd like to see it utilized to the degree that it needs to be utilized.
Commissioner Vetch, my only comment or concern about that is that you need to approve our board members, and it is far too late to get that done with 2 weeks to go. And the staff that we have currently on our temporary list, we do have balance that we are achieving when we need to. But I don't have any guarantees that they are available on election day to help us here. Many of our temporary staff members are also election judges at precincts. And that was part of our agreement in hiring them to help us, that they'll help us leading up to the election, and then they will go do their work when they are needed on election day for their own precincts. So the time is not in our favor as it stands right now. I would need all 5 of you to agree by resolution that we would approve any additional ballot board members.
Yep.
Please, have at it.
Tyler?
Members of the board, Madam Chair, a couple things. One, we did pass our deadline to appoint election judges. That was on the 14th, so we can appoint emergency judges, but just from a formal process, we're not able to appoint new election judges. Another thing I would say is, if we want to count on election day, I would ask that we have some kind of redundant system in place in case the 450 breaks down or is unable to process ballots. If we're sitting there on election day morning and the 450 breaks down and I got 30,000 ballots to count, it's going to take us a lot longer. And, we do have that 24-hour requirement once we hit 8 o'clock on election night to produce our results and have everything ready. So a couple considerations. I would say a new DS450, we just got a quote from the vendor. That's going to run about $56,000. If we want a more high-powered machine, the DS950, that's $133,000 for a new machine like that. So
what's there used to be the 850, so now they went to the 950?
Yeah, the 850, they're no longer making that. They are refurbishing them. So we could get one of those for about $100,000. But
Because the 950 isn't that 300 ballots per minute?
I'm not sure what the BPMs are on those.
I think it's something in that neighborhood, I believe. It's pretty substantially fast.
Yeah, what I would say with the processing is we're more limited by, we have, I want to say 49 precincts in Wright County, and so we have to individually count each one of those precincts. So it's not so much the processing power of the machines as it is we have to switch it out each time for new precincts, and some precincts are larger, so there's other considerations to think about when we're doing that math.
And Madam Chair, and I think from a redundancy standpoint, if that was ever the way that we would be going, whether it's now or in 2 years from now, you'd want to have the redundancy of equipment, whether it's a DS 950 for the primary and then the DS 450 as a backup, or vice versa, just because you don't want to be stuck with your pants down with nothing to use except for hand counting, and you can't do it in 24 hours.
Yeah, Senator Vetch. I just think that if you did do this and you ended up having problems and it took longer than 24 hours and you didn't meet that, then you're gonna be causing all sorts more problems with people saying, oh, it's bad, somebody's goofed up, somebody did something bad at Wright County. And I think at this point, we have proven that we've never had any issues in Wright County. I think there's no reason why to change it midstream, especially when we have all other counties in Minnesota doing it the same way. And if the state wants to make the change, that's fine. But to go out and do it ourselves, I don't think it's worth it. For the few people that don't believe it's an accurate account.
In Madam Chair, in just a quick response to that, you know, and I wish I was only a few people that believe that, but I'm amazed at the amount of people that I have conversations with, and that is where I feel like something has to be done, and so many people at so many different levels are turning a blind eye to it, and it's growing, the concern, and whether warranted or not, I don't know. So for that reason, if nothing else, we have to start making steps to say, okay, we are validating your concerns and we're going to take it serious, whether real or not. You have to move that needle to get that integrity back. So that's where I look at it. Okay, if us making this step is one posturing to say that, yeah, we have questions on to the black and white language you have in there, and it's one basically step to saying that, you know what, maybe there should be some legal questions asked to the legislator to make clarity to it, or to the Supreme Court to make clarity to it, so that we're all.
Then that's what we do, is that you have those concerns, you tell our legislators, because there's nothing we can do about it. It has to come from the state. And to keep going over something we can't control, I think is a waste of time.
Well, you can control to a certain degree, because this is where the language and because the control is delegated to us to make these decisions. Whether we should have it or not is questionable. I don't know, but it is delegated to the local government to make these decisions, and therefore that is why these individuals are asking us to make
Based off of state statutes.
based off of state statutes.
And that's what we are doing, based off of state statutes.
But that state statute has gray areas. to it.
Again,
Yes.
not something the county can deal with. Yeah, we can go out on a limb and do all sorts of stuff and end up in a court case ourselves by some other group that says, you know, oh, it's not right the way you did it. I think it's just a waste of time to be dealing with it at this level, and it's something that we can bring up to our legislators when we meet with them in December or whenever it was that we're going to. I'm just not sure that this is the place to be dealing with it when we have the 350 people that are watching us on YouTube. I just don't think it's worth the time
Madam
when we
Chair,
have other things we can do.
Madam Chair, and when you're talking about legislative action, unless you get a extreme change in the legislature and in the leadership, I don't think you're going to see.
Again, that goes up to the public and who they elect. So
That's-
if the general public doesn't have a concern about it and that's who they elect, then that's the way it is.
And I do.
We are a democracy.
Yes, and that, I'm just pointing out that, you know, if you want change, you got to look that way, and
Well, it's not gonna happen.
and our leaderships and
And it's
stuff
not going
like
to change
that.
with the two-party system. So let's just move on from here.
Yeah, it's whoever we vote for is how it's going to change.
All right.
So I'm assuming if I make any motions here, I'm not going to get a second. So.
We already had a motion to approve the minutes.
Yeah.
You move the minutes, but I'm looking if I make a second motion, but I'm cautious to do so, just because I do understand, though, the risk that would be made with making a motion to do this, that we do not have redundancy if we would take on such action. And then there's also the ability to even facilitate that with ballot judges in light of the time schedule, which is very unfortunate. For that sake, I'm going to, I
Wait
don't.
till after November 8th.
Let's,
Well, I guess,
let's
you know,
first, before you go on,
I
let's
really-
vote on just approving the minutes.
You want to approve the minutes? Okay.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Commissioner Vetch?
Yeah, I really wish we were in a better position to be able to still facilitate this, but unfortunately, I don't want us to, I don't want to put a motion out there that puts us at risk of not being able to meet the 24-hour time frame,
That's right.
as well as the lack of going into it without having any form of redundancy, and as well as having secured staff prior to doing this. For that reason, I am going to unfortunately forego on it, but I do want to say that I think this is something that either needs to get clarity on it from the state level on some, whether it's a judicial or legislative matter. And I do think that this is stuff that we need to look at from an equipment standpoint for future elections so that we can put ourselves in a better situation.
That I agree on.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for good discussion. And moving on, advisory committee, advisory board updates. Administrator Kelly, would you like to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend the AMC District 5 meeting, which I thought was a very good meeting. We did review the proposed legislative platform from AMC and discuss that. A lot of counties are similarly situated as us in that in the middle of negotiations and trying to work through that, as well as balancing that with their budgets and a number of different items. So can put the materials from the meeting in the back bullpen area. I think you'll find it interesting. We did have some discussion around elections and some materials that AMC had prepared as well that I thought was very valuable too. So good meeting, good discussion, and good networking with our peers on that one. Just one other thing, reminder, we're about 14 days from go live with ERP. So that's coming up quick. I know there's a session of training scheduled next week for the board. So still continuing to work on negotiating the contract with Oracle for the upcoming 3 years. So hopefully we'll have that wrapped up and able to bring that to the board in November here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ketchmark?
I don't have anything, Madam Chair.
I don't either, Madam Chair.
Let's see. I have a few things. So the opioid settlement advisory committee met for our second meeting, and we had taken a survey to look at funding prioritization, and we discussed that, how it would be more user-friendly for residents to weigh in on their thoughts. And so we're also had looked at the John Hopkins guiding principles, and they are to spend the money to save lives, use evidence to guide spending, invest in youth prevention, focus on racial equality, and develop a fair and transparent process for deciding where to spend the money. And essentially, the areas we're looking at is treatment, recovery, criminal justice, prevention, and harm reduction. So we'll, hopefully they'll be working on getting a survey out to the public. I was also at the Great River Regional Library meeting, and we have a number of libraries and discussed different facility assessments on them. There's a couple that are in need of updating and that kind of thing. So it was a workshop, so it was not a regular business meeting. And really appreciated the District 5 meeting yesterday. Had a, just some good discussion. I really enjoy those. And also, I was on KRWC last Wednesday. So that was my last visit as a Wright County Commissioner. It's kind of sad. Yeah, kind of talked a bit about, some of the things we've had going on, and so that's about it. Commissioner Vetch?
Madam Chair, I don't have much to report. After an MEA week last week, there was a lot of meetings that were moved, so.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, again, on the AMC District 5 meeting, I was there too, and I didn't know anything about this, the $1.5 billion for public lands was given to the counties, and we got $50,000, both this year and next year, which I thought was nice. So, I don't know, it can't be used for, any lobbying purposes. So like, we couldn't give it like to AMC or MRC or any of those type groups that do lobbying, so. But I thought that was a great, thing that happened. I don't know exactly what, but I guess NACO was the one that kind of was pushing for that, so.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner Redder, that was part of the ARP package. I don't feel it was very well communicated down from the
No.
federal to us. It did come as a bit of a surprise to the counties, I believe, overwhelmingly. Interestingly enough, as of yesterday, we did receive those funds, had planned that as an agenda item for next week's board, just to acknowledge acceptance. And we're planning that would be set up similarly in the process that we've used for other ARP funds to determine how we would utilize those at the board's direction in spending those funds. So,
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Besh.
Commissioner Kelly, I'm guessing they used the PILT formula for that?
I'm not exactly sure how they determined it. It was an overall amount. Not all counties in Minnesota were eligible. And there was a floor amount of 50,000 that we.
Because that's what it sounds like, because we get a nominal amount of PILT, and it sounds like that would be the methodology. If Sherburne County got a substantial larger number, then it would be PILT.
It might be. I'm not
I don't know.
positive.
Sherburne and Wright got the same, are getting the same.
Well, then they
amount,
weren't using PILT
but
as their
yeah.
formula. Interesting. I wonder
It's,
what they-
it's,
Yeah.
it's the amount of public lands essentially in tribal. Tribal.
Because Sherburne County has quite a bit with their refuge. That's
But I thought,
Well, we still got quite a bit if they allow us to have, when you got around Pelican Lake and Lake Mariah, when you start looking at all the property that the DNR has accumulated around
yes.
yeah,
around Pelican Lake, you'd be surprised.
true that.
And that was the most, I mean, that was the most of the counties got 50,000, and then some got, one got 1.357 million, another
Which
got.
county was that?
St. Louis County, probably.
No, yeah, St. Louis.
St. Louis and Cook
guess.
Yeah.
were
And-
benefactors.
Cook
Boundary
County,
Waters.
Itasca, yep, so, a lot of public lands in some of those Lake County, so.
So they might have used the
Yeah.
PELT formula.
Oh, yeah.
Formula, yeah.
So there was some kind of a formula, but it didn't, I don't think it was really consistent with some of the rest of the counties. It seemed like that, why would we all get this kind of the same amount? But
And then maybe there was a minimum amount and
I
then,
think
Yeah,
that's what it was,
that minimum
And then you
amount
use the
was the
fill.
50,000, so,
yeah.
but we'll take it.
absolutely.
Then I had a historical society meeting, and they reminded everybody that they're looking for Festival of Trees volunteers. So if you got some extra time, I'm sure they'll accept your time and work. And new to me too is that they're going to be on the county phone system once they get some phones that will work on it. Right now, they don't. So I don't know if there's some phones around that we would have that they could use or not, but that'd be something to look into. And then they're also getting ready for their display that opens, I think, in February on music in Wright County. The bands and different music displays.
See, Lee, aren't you disappointed now that you don't live in the right county? Your band could have been in that.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there's a display out there with some of the
Yes,
bands.
yes.
Band.
Yes.
I'd actually
And-
like to see Lee play that one-man band instrument that's in there.
Yes, the Nelsonian. I'd like to see anybody play that thing.
That's exactly right. And then, in extension, I'm in the search committee for the crops extension educator. That's the shared position between Wright, McLeod, and Meeker. And it is now posted, and the deadline will be November 11th to apply on that position. Then last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I was at an interesting meeting, and I thought I would share this with the rest of you on the ARP money that was given to the senior community services. I think it was like 16,000 or something, that was shared with them so that they could teach the seniors how to use
Computers?
IT sort of stuff. Well, what they did is they went to Sherburne County, and they got money from them from the ARP. They went to Hennepin County, and they also got money through ARP through them. And then there was another opportunity they could go to the state. Well, what started off was us, because each county said, well, if Wright County gave them money, then we should too. And so they passed that along, and when the state looked at it, they said, well, if all these counties gave to it, must be worthwhile, so then they got a bunch of money. So I'm just trying to say that sometimes what we're giving through the ARPA money is maybe a start of a continuation of help for some of these organizations. And this person, Joe Call, was very appreciative that Wright County had stuck their neck out in the beginning. So I just thought I should pass that along on, you know, what happens as a result.
So how many people did they teach?
I honestly couldn't tell you.
I'd be kind of curious to find out.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, and
He says he's really set up now, so,
when you spend all the money on equipment and has none left over to hold the classes, I'd be curious to find out, and, you know, what age groups too.
Yeah.
You know, was it
It's-
40-year-olds or 55? Once you got your ARP card, you started going to it?
I don't know those answers.
All right.
I'm sure I could find out, though.
It'd be interesting, that's all.
There's nothing else to come before the board. We're adjourned at 10:22. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.